The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie silver glow over the quiet fields. A gentle breeze whispered through the tall stalks of corn, swaying like a ghostly dance. But on this ordinary night, the quietness masked a brewing storm of chaos, a moment that would change everything for one unsuspecting farmer. Out in the heart of the countryside, beyond the buzzing city lights, lived Farmer Henry. He was a gruff man with hands roughened by years of toil, but beneath that weathered exterior lay a heart full of compassion and hard-earned wisdom. He loved his land fiercely, having poured sweat and dreams into every inch of it. His nights were usually filled with the soft rustle of the wind and the harmonious chorus of crickets, but tonight would be different. They were infamous for their pranks, mean-spirited tricks meant to terrorize the unsuspecting. They thrived on fear, chortling at the panic they sowed in the hearts of others. A couple of days earlier, they'd spotted Henry working late in the fields. It was an easy target, they decided, a solitary farmer, miles away from help. The idea of scaring him had quickly morphed into something darker, a twisted plan that mingled excitement with a hint of malice. The leader of the Ravens, a wiry figure named Rex, rubbed his hands together as they gathered in the darkness. "Tonight we give him a real fright," he hissed, a grin stretching across his face, revealing a set of crooked teeth. The gang hooted and agreed, excitement burning in their eyes. They set off toward Henry's farm, eager for their cruel games. As they approached the barn, the thrill of anticipation coursed through them. The moonlight illuminated the sprawling yard, and they could see the farm silhouette, the old barn, the rusted tools, the weather-beaten farmhouse, all basked in a haunting glow. "Let's move in quietly," Rex whispered, hands signaling the others to follow. They crept toward the house, hearts racing with the promise of fright. With a nod, they tossed a few rocks against the barn to cause a ruckus. The sound echoed through the silence, sharp and jarring. Inside, Farmer Henry felt the vibrations of the impact echo his own heartbeat. He brushed off the fatigue from another long day, curious but not overly concerned. Maybe it was just the wind or an animal thrown off by the errant noise. But then came the real act. The gang slid back into a thicket of trees, waiting for the right moment to unleash their terror. They unwrapped a series of fireworks, sparklers, and rockets plunging into the air, lighting up the night sky in wild colors. The flashes danced like sinister spirits, illuminating the dark landscape for split seconds. They could hear Farmer Henry cursing now, steps moving toward the source of the chaos. "Let's have a little fun," Rex motioned, grinning wider, his excitement palpable. They knew Henry's routine. Late at night, he often stepped out to inspect whatever bizarre sound disturbed his solitude. The gang was ready, timed perfectly to spring their trap. Just as the door of the farmhouse creaked open, they erupted from the trees like phantoms. The shrill laughter rang out, cackles of joy woven with sheer malice. But to their shock, Farmer Henry didn't flinch. Instead, he squinted through the darkness, focusing on the figures darting around like trouble-making shadows. The laughter withered into an uneasy silence as they realized he wasn't scared at all. He was standing tall, shoulders back, eyes glinting under the pale moonlight. Henry challenged, his voice strong and steady. It echoed through the still night, slicing through the tension like a knife. The gang faltered for a moment, confused. They shuffled behind trees, whispering among themselves, uncertainty creeping in. Rex frowned, his bravado dimming as he took a cautious step forward. Rex shouted, attempting to regain control, but the gang's energy was waning, fear gnawing at the edges of their bravado. Henry advanced toward them, slow but sure, and something in his posture made the gang hesitate. As the silence stretched out, Henry approached with the quiet confidence of a man who had faced greater storms than this band of mischief-makers. He asked, voice rising slightly, "What are you doing out here at this hour?" The gang whispered amongst themselves, faces shifting from cocky confidence to uncertain exchanges. Rex frowned, realizing that the bravado they thrived on was fading. "What's wrong, Henry?" He attempted to reignite the moment, but uncertainty lingered in the air. "No," Henry replied, voice carrying through the night. "But I'm not blind to your cowardice either. You think terror makes you strong. You think that fright makes you brave." With each step, the gang shrank back. Rex's hands trembled as he shifted on his feet, searching for his next words, trying to salvage this moment gone wrong. He breathed heavily, and for a split second he saw a flicker of something in Henry's eyes: wisdom, clarity, and a force that stemmed not from weapons or tricks. "Look at you," Henry continued, now inches away from the group. "What has fear ever brought you? You stand there hiding in the shadows, thinking you're a threat." He paused, the wind swirling around them. "And what will you achieve tonight? A moment of laughter, a few thrills." A silence fell, deeper than the night itself. The gang looked at one another, their bravado flickering, feeling the weight of Henry's words. It was unexpected, a lesson wrapped in confrontation. Brief murmurs passed between them, doubt creeping in like a thief. It stopped being a game, it became a mirror reflecting their own shortcomings. Rex, sensing the shift, felt angry, defensive. "Shut up. You're just an old man pretending to be wise," he spat, desperately holding onto the remnants of his confidence. A mask of bravado slipped over his true feelings, but Henry only smiled quietly, unaffected. "Old doesn't mean weak, Rex, and wisdom doesn't come with age, it comes with listening and learning," he replied, unwavering. "You've got it all wrong. You're not terrorizing me, you're showing me how lost you are." The gang watched, a mix of admiration and confusion flickering in their eyes. This wasn't what they had planned for the night. They had come armed with fireworks and laughter, ready to breathe chaos into the calm, but now they found themselves disarmed. One of the younger members quietly asked, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "Because what you call fun will only lead you to more sorrow," Henry said gently. "Fear is a heavy burden, one that doesn't belong among friends or family. If you want to lift each other, you should find strength, not weaknesses." In that moment, as the moonlight pooled around them, something shifted. The atmosphere hung charged, almost electric. One by one, the gang members looked at each other, bonds of loyalty forged through misunderstandings and chaos now wavering. The laughter they had sought scuttled into uncertainty. Rex felt the tide turning. He could either dig deeper into anger and pride or seek a doorway to something greater. He asked, his bravado faltering for the first time. "What else is there? Is this it?" Henry stepped a little closer, his confidence unyielding. "You could choose to be better, to move away from fear, to build something rather than destroy. There's plenty of work to be done on a farm. Want to scare me? Join me." A tentative hush fell over the gang. They exchanged glances, uncertainty slowly giving way to curiosity. One of them, the youngest, finally broke the silence. A spark of hope ignited in his voice. "Yes," Henry answered, his eyes warm, unwavering. "You could help tend the crops or fix the fences. You could learn about the land, you could learn about yourselves. Build rather than break, support rather than scare." As the night deepened, the intent behind those words began to seep into their bones. In a quiet act of rebellion against the darkness of their past, the gang found their strength in vulnerability. Slowly, Rex nodded. The tension had shifted, the firework chaos lighting up the night now replaced by a soft hum of understanding. Feeling the weight of their past choices, they took hesitant steps forward, not as a gang of trouble but as figures inspired for change. They stood there in that moonlit silence, transformed, reflecting on the choices before them. Farmer Henry had not only stood his ground, he'd opened a door. The night that began with terror morphed into a shared moment of creation, bonding them through unexpected connections. Their laughter, once malicious, turned into genuine amusement, hope blossoming in the moonlight, reminding them that they were indeed more than shadows standing in the dark. In that field, fear didn't claim victory. Instead, it gave birth to a new beginning, a lesson learned on that hauntingly beautiful night, echoing in the hearts of those who dared to listen. Fear had lost its grip, and in its place, courage began to flourish, a bond formed under the vast expanse of a starry sky, where once malicious intent transformed into the promise of a brighter tomorrow. The night was still, the kind of stillness that seemed to hold its breath, as if the entire world was waiting for something to happen. A sliver of moonlight flickered through the rusted old barn doors on Farmer Joe's land. Here, nestled in the heart of the country, life moved slowly. The rhythm of the seasons painted every corner, furrowed every field, and filled every crevice with purpose. But tonight, impending chaos brewed just beyond the field's edge. Not too far away, a gang called the Shadows lurked in the pitch blackness of the woods. Each member had a reputation for reckless pranks, a fixation on fear sometimes laced with cruelty. With giddy excitement, they whispered among themselves, plotting their next act of terror. They had set their sights on the farmer, imagining his startled face when they unleashed their chaos. It was all supposed to be a laugh, a night of adrenaline. "Let's show that stick in the mud what we're capable of," slurred Ricky, the gang's wiry instigator, his breath swirling with bravado. The others followed his lead. They had been planning this for days, throwing a few well-placed firecrackers would send the farmer sprinting like a chicken with its head cut off. As they crossed the boundary of the woods, the laughter rang out like a grotesque symphony. They stole through the corn rows, threading their way toward the heart of the farmer's domain. The moon cast long shadows like fingers reaching out, grasping at the danger they felt bubbling inside them. With each step, tension dripped into the air. Chuckled Stan, a burly figure with a knack for trouble. They wriggled through the rows, each of them itching for the moment of terror they were about to unleash. It was thrilling. They felt untouchable, riding the wave of adrenaline that comes with being part of something daring. Just ahead, the barn stood looming, weather-beaten and proud. As they reached the door, Ricky turned to the group, motioning for silence. "Here goes nothing," he whispered, a wicked grin spreading across his face. With a swift, fluid motion, he kicked the barn door wide open, revealing the farmer's sanctuary. The gang rushed in, reveling in the anticipation of their prank. At the far end stood Farmer Joe, caught off guard, wearing an old plaid shirt, suspenders hanging loosely at his sides. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing, lips forming a thin line as the shadows crept into the light. The gang erupted with laughter, but before they could continue, they were met with an unexpected sight. Farmer Joe stood tall, arms folded, an amused smirk gracing his face. He didn't appear scared. Instead, he looked bemused. His calmness cut through their chaotic laughter like a knife. "Is this what you've come to?" he said, laughter bubbling in his voice mixed with an undercurrent of something deeper. The gang froze, taken aback. This was not the reaction they had anticipated. Ricky's bravado faltered for a brief moment. "What?" Ricky shot back defensively, masking his uncertainty with bravado. The gang shared uneasy glances. They expected to see fear, to see a man crumble. Instead, Joe stood there, drawing them in rather than pushing them away. It was unnerving. "I don't think I'm funny," Joe replied, his voice steady, dripping with the wisdom of years spent toiling under the sun. The silence grew, stretching taut like a bowstring, the air charged with an energy that shifted from laughter to something more serious. The gang, once united in their malice, began to feel an uneasy sense of doubt creeping in. Ricky, trying to reestablish control, took a step forward. "It's just a prank." His words fell flat, echoing softly in the barn, swallowed by the heavy stillness. "I know enough to see that you don't know what you're really afraid of," Joe replied calmly, his eyes piercing through the bravado. Stan scoffed, crossing his arms, warily stepping back, unsure where this conversation was heading. But deep down, he felt a flicker of something. A truth, maybe, or just the realization that they weren't as brave as they pretended. "Scared of wasting your lives on petty games, scared of becoming the kind of people who hurt others to feel good about yourselves," Joe said, his voice low but impactful. "You want to be remembered as the troublemakers." A heaviness settled in the barn, and for the first time the gang felt exposed. The mere act of scaring the farmer morphed into a mirror that reflected their hidden fears. It wasn't just the laughter anymore. It was about themselves, their insecurities woven into every action they took. Ricky spat, trying to hold onto his bravado, but it was slipping. Joe challenged, his voice sharp. "Real fun doesn't come from hurting others." With each word, he stepped closer, and the gang found themselves retreating, not from the physical space, but from the weight of his words. All at once, a flicker of uncertainty crossed their faces. They were no longer the hunters, but the hunted sheets of doubt wrapped around them tighter with every heartbeat. They were trying to fight against the inevitable, against the understanding that had begun to seep in. "Maybe you're right," one of the younger members, a boy barely past his teens, spoke up hesitantly. "But it's hard." "Fun doesn't have to come at the expense of another kid," Joe replied, his eyes softening. "It can be about building relationships, finding reasons to laugh together, not at someone else's expense. Look around," Ricky said defensively, still trying to rally his strength. But his voice quavered, uncertainty slipping through the cracks. Because this, Joe gestured toward the open fields, the moonlit landscape spilling through the barn doors, could be yours too. Every seed planted, every crop that flourishes, every moment standing under this sky is something to cherish. One by one, the shadows shifted, the bravado waning, revealing the vulnerability hiding beneath. They knew that deep down, each of them had craved something real, something more than petty tricks and chaotic laughter. It had been a facade they wore, but now they had a chance to see who they really were, away from the masks they had crafted. "Look, I'm not here to yell or beat you," Joe continued, his voice calm and inviting. "I'm trying to show you a different path, a way out of these woods of fear and anger. You want to scare me? You can't, but you can join me, help me on the farm." Stan said, bewildered, "Because you can take control of your actions. You could grow something together, build a community rather than tearing each other down." Joe held their gaze unwavering, and a hush of contemplation washed over the room. Ricky, the bravest of the gang, felt the cracks in his defiance. "But we're not like you. Yesterday's choices don't define you, but today's can," Joe replied, a gentle firmness lacing his voice. "You can decide who you want to be." The shadows that once thrived in darkness flickered under Farmer Joe's unwavering light. Those seeds of doubt began to take root, planting hope in unexpected soil. One by one, they began to nod, a silent acknowledgement that maybe he was right. Maybe the thrill of tearing someone down was nothing compared to the power of creating something anew. "All right," Ricky finally relented, the bravado in his voice softening. "We'll help." "That's the point," Joe replied with a grin, a spark of humor lacing his words. "You don't have to be perfect, you just have to try." As the tension broke, a new energy pulsed through the barn, transforming the atmosphere once charged with defiance into one of unity and understanding. The gang, caught off guard at first by this unexpected change of heart, now stood together, feeling the weight of the night seep away. And so, under the vast starry sky spilling into the expansive barn, those young men found themselves stepping into the role they never anticipated, the role of builders, of helpers, of friends. The darkness that had once consumed them began to recede, each of them discovering in the aftermath the joy of laughter not aimed at others, but shared among those who dared to stand together. Farmer Joe led them into a new chapter, an adventure that would tether them to the land itself. The moon smiled down upon them, a quiet witness to their transformation, capturing that moment when fear lost and growth began to flourish. And together they began to sow not only crops but the seeds of a brighter future. A sharp crack echoed through the stillness of the night, igniting a tension-filled silence on Farmer Bill's land. He paused, shoveling dirt beneath the moonlight, as fear laced the air around him, more sophisticated than a mere creature of the night. This was something deeper. He had heard whispers of a local gang, the Shadow Riders, known not for their fearlessness, but for their cruel pranks, each more elaborate than the last. Earlier that same week, the gang had announced they were going to pay a visit to Farmer Bill, eager to make him the next target of their twisted sense of humor. With mischievous grins and bravado bubbling in their chests, they plotted how best to scare the notoriously tough farmer, thinking he'd jump like a startled rabbit. Jesse, the de facto leader, suggested with eyes alight with thrill, "What if we rigged up something to rattle him?" The others chimed in, their laughter reverberating through the air. They could already picture Bill's face, his expression shifting from annoyance to panic. It would be a glorious thrill, an intoxicating wave of power that surged through them. That night, equipped with firecrackers and fake bats, they slinked through the shadows of the trees bordering Bill's farm. The moon hung high, its light painting ghostly shapes on the ground. Their hearts raced, not from fear but from a sense of impunity. They moved like thieves in the night, creeping toward the old farmhouse, imagining the chaos they were about to wreak. But the moment they reached the porch, a heavy silence crashed around them. It was unexpected, like cold water over a heated flame. Bill stood on the other side of the door. The silhouette of a man, strong and resolute, loomed within the warm glow of the house. They could see him through the window, casually enjoying a cup of coffee, his hat tilted slightly forward, hiding his eyes but not his calm demeanor. "Okay, on three," Jesse whispered, the bravado creeping back. "We do it all at once. Light the firecrackers and bang on the door." The others nodded, their eagerness palpable, but as they counted down, an odd weight swelled in the air. Something deep inside each of them paused, but youth's bravado pushed those feelings aside. 3. They exploded into a cacophony of noise, banging the door and setting off the firecrackers. For a moment they felt invincible, like kings casting their shadows across the night. But then came the unexpected. The door didn't fly open. Instead, they heard a slow, deliberate laugh from inside. It was deep, rolling like thunder under the sky. Bill's voice swept over them like a warm breeze. Puzzled, the gang shifted uneasily. It was as though Bill stood there, unbothered by their chaos. Then the door creaked open, revealing Farmer Bill, tall and sturdy, his eyes dancing with amusement. He asked, his demeanor still calm and collected, a slight smirk on his face. Jesse stammered, unable to locate his usual confidence. The laughter that once echoed in their chests faded, replaced by a ripple of apprehension that crackled through the air. Bill interrupted. There it was. A shift in the ground beneath them. A rolling wave of truth that made their carefree intentions seem trivial, childish even. Bill stood there, unshakable. He wasn't cowering in fear, but examining them, delving into who they were beneath the bravado. Suddenly, the sharp arrogance of the gang met the grit of reality. Bill leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, voice deep like the roots of an old oak. There was something mesmerizing about his presence, the authority he exuded, the sheer confidence that made them feel smaller. Jesse, desperate to reestablish the upper hand, swallowed hard. It's just a prank, old man. The farmer's expression shifted. Prank. He pointed to the field stretching out behind him, bathed in moonlight. Bravery is getting up at dawn to till the soil, planting seeds, and waiting for them to grow. It's pushing through rough seasons and still finding joy in the sunshine. As Bill spoke, the air around the gang thickened with contemplation. They had never considered their actions in such light. It wasn't just fear that they spread. It was a trivial pursuit that buried them deeper into a game where the stakes were nothing more than petty entertainment. Bill pressed, stepping down from the porch, now standing boldly before them. To be known as the boys who threw firecrackers at a farmer, your pranks won't build you up. With each word, Farmer Bill painted a picture of something they had never thought possible, a life driven by purpose, something more substantial than mock terror and bravado. The gang seemed to shrink, words choking at the back of their throats, rattled by an unexpected wave of emotion. Ricky finally spoke up, his bravado faltering, replaced by a flicker of vulnerability. There was a raw honesty in his voice, and the other gang members nodded, tears threatening to brew beneath their bravado. That's true, Bill said gently, not patronizing but filled with a granule of empathy. I don't know your lives, but if you let fear guide your actions, you'll never know the strength that lies beneath. You think causing fear gives you power, but really, it just shows how much you're hiding. The silence thickened. Bill had shifted their perspective, deconstructing their bravado with sheer honesty and wisdom. They had always thought of themselves as strong, dominant over their surroundings, but perhaps they were simply afraid of stepping out of their comfort zones. What do you mean? It's not like we can just go farming, Jesse retorted weakly. Maybe not farming, Bill remarked, a sly smile flickering at the corners of his lips. But what if you used your energy to do something meaningful? Help with chores, learn a skill or two. A flicker ignited in Ricky's eyes. He asked, curiosity breaking through the fear. Anything, said Bill softly. You've got the strength. You've got the energy. What if you helped us during planting season or fixed fences? One by one, the gang glanced at one another, the bravado bleeding away, replaced by something distinctly human, a desire for connection, for growth, for learning. It was terrifying yet exhilarating. They had come to terrorize, only to find a pathway lying wide open before them. I can't even picture myself doing that, Jesse admitted. There was a vulnerability in his voice that hadn't existed moments before. I can't work the land, added Stan hesitantly, eyes wide. Well, Farmer Bill said, straightening up, then it's settled. You're going to spend the summer with me. A collective gasp hung in the air as disbelief permeated their thoughts, but beneath that disbelief lay a well of opportunity. Each faced the moment like a breath of fresh air, the weight of their intentions shifting once more. They stood there on the porch of Farmer Bill, no longer a gang of mischief makers but potential partners ready to turn fear into possibilities. Roots of understanding intertwined, weaving through uncertainty and anxiety, threading their hearts closer together. "I can't promise I'll be good at it," Ricky said. The honesty startled him, but it was liberating. "Promise to try, and that's more than enough," Bill replied, his voice a blend of kindness and challenge. "You don't have to be perfect. You just have to start." As the moon hung high above the barn, illuminating the paths ahead, the gang of the Shadow Riders transformed that night. Fear and bravado shed away like old worn-out clothes. They stepped into a future that seemed infinitely brighter, underpinned by the community they never knew they needed. The next few months became a tapestry of experiences, laughter, and hard work. The rows of crops began to flourish as hands that once only wielded pranks learned the value of careful tending. They planted seeds, not just in the soil but within themselves, where growth was possible. And as the sun set behind the fields, casting a golden hue across the landscape, the Shadow Riders learned the magic within resilience, the kind that creeps up roots and blossoms, the kind embedded in a life spent in service to the land and each other. Life, as they discovered, was not about the thrill of fear but the joy of connection. The power of transformation laid bare before them, rising like the crops they nurtured together, born from a place of genuine courage and shared dreams. The night air was thick with suspense, the kind that prickled at the back of your neck. The moon hung low, lighting up the expanse of Farmer Thompson's land with an eerie glow. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, but here at the farmhouse, a different kind of disturbance was brewing, one that would challenge everything Farmer Thompson believed about fear and courage. On the edge of town, a notorious gang known as the Night Runners had set their sights on Farmer Thompson. They were infamous for their pranks scaring villagers was their game, their friendships forged in laughter that often tiptoed into cruelty. Fueled by adrenaline and misguided bravado, they planned to rattle the old farmer, imagining his startled face, picturing themselves as masterminds of terror. "Psst, guys, tonight's the night," Jake said, crouching low as they huddled behind a clump of bushes. His eyes sparkled with mischief, and he felt invincible. "We'll scare the daylights out of that old man." Tommy, always a little anxious but eager to fit in, nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, but what if he gets mad?" But there was an undeniable excitement in the air, swirling around them like a potent potion, intoxicating and reckless. "Relax, it'll be cake," said Sarah, a fierce girl with a wild streak. "We just set some firecrackers off, maybe toss a fake snake or two around." With that, their plan solidified. A firecracker here, a rubber snake there, and they'd be legends. Tension and thrill knitted together in their hearts as they quietly crept through the overgrown grass, moving closer to the farmhouse. The old barn loomed ahead, its silhouette sharp against the night sky. Farmer Thompson was known for his sturdy work ethic and his no-nonsense attitude, but they were convinced that beneath that tough exterior was a frightened old man waiting to be startled. As they approached the porch, excitement bubbled over. "Ready? 1, 2. Sarah whispered, and they sprang into action. Firecrackers went off with a bang, filling the night with sound. The gang laughed hysterically, barely able to contain their glee. But then they heard it, a slow, deliberate clap of hands. They froze, eyes wide, hearts pounding. Standing in the doorway was Farmer Thompson, the light from the inside casting a ghostly glow around him. "Bravo. Very clever," he said, his voice rich and deep, reverberating with a calm authority that sent shivers down their spines. Jake stammered, caught off guard. This wasn't the reaction they were expecting. The vibrant bravado of their fearlessness shrunk in the face of his unyielding confidence. Thompson continued, stepping out of the shadows with an amused expression. The gang exchanged nervous glances. This was far from the chaos they had envisioned. Jake tried to regain his footing, laughter turning awkward. "It was just a prank, Mr. Thompson." But Thompson's eyes glinted sharp beneath the moonlight. "Pranks? You think it's clever to scare others?" A silence enveloped them as the weight of his words sank in. It was no longer a game. Instead, they stood exposed, the bravado peeling away to reveal the vulnerability beneath it all. As kids often do, they had sought to feel powerful, only to come face to face with the kind of strength that resonated deep within the farmer. "Listen, I get it," Thompson said, his tone softening yet still firm. "You think it makes you brave to scare someone else, but real bravery is facing your own fears. For the first time, the gang felt something stir within, perhaps guilt or realization. The thrill they had sought dwindled, the punchline deflating like a balloon. They had traded moments of excitement for a growing understanding of their choices. Your pranks don't show who you are. They hide your true selves, Thompson continued, taking a step closer. His demeanor didn't change, his voice commanding while inviting. Tommy asked, his boldness evaporating as curiosity edged in. Thompson suggested, gesturing toward the vast expanse of land tied to his legacy. Learn to plant seeds, feed the animals, understand the labor that goes into maintaining something you'll grow to appreciate. They exchanged glances, confusion battling with intrigue. Tommy, who always felt overlooked, was captivated. The thought of connecting to the land, of actually doing something meaningful, sparked a glimmer of excitement. Are you serious? Jake managed, disbelief etched on his face. Because you've got strength, Thompson replied, unfazed. Strength you can use for good. You think you can terrorize an old farmer. There's nothing strong about that. You want a challenge, step out of your comfort zone. In that moment, something shifted within them. The energy that had once thrummed with chaos transformed into something deeper, a connection between their hearts and the land waiting patiently beneath the moonlit sky. Maybe we could, Sarah suggested slowly, her voice softer now. It felt right, not like a playful prank, but a commitment to something more fulfilling. Help you. I'll teach you, Thompson said, stepping further onto the porch, inviting them into his world. What's life without a bit of hard work? Let's face those fears together, and who knows? There was a palpable pause, a beat of realization settling in, like rain soaking parched earth. It was an invitation not just to labor, but to grow, to shed old skins of mischief and embrace something meaningful. And so, under the starry sky, they returned inside the farmhouse, something shifting in their collective hearts. The laughter from earlier began to die down, transformed now into a sense of purpose, something they hadn't expected that night. They were no longer the night runners, hunting for cheap thrills. They were about to become something more. Weeks passed, and the days rolled on with rhythm. They found themselves rising early to face the sun, the land opening up before them like a canvas waiting to be painted. Farmer Thompson guided them through every task with patience and wisdom. They learned to sow seeds, to understand the roots that grew deep, both in the earth and in themselves. As sweat trickled down their brows, they slowly transformed from thrill-seeking troublemakers into budding caretakers of the land. The satisfaction of seeing the first sprouts break through the soil struck them like a revelation. It was exhilarating. They had created life rather than destruction. One evening, after a long day in the fields, they sat together on a pile of hay, the orange hues of the sunset wrapping around them. Laughter echoed against the twilight, but it was different this time, genuine, hearty, and filled with connection rather than malice. Tommy chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. Jake teased, and as they continued to share their stories, something profound began to happen. With each laugh, with each shared moment, the bonds between them deepened. They had faced their fears and discovered courage in unexpected places through labor, honesty, and emulating what it truly meant to grow. Farmer Thompson watched from a distance, pride swelling in his chest as he listened to their laughter. It wasn't just the work that had changed them. It was the realization that they had stepped into their own power, finding fulfillment and meaning where once there was chaos. They unearthed secrets beneath the soil, cultivating relationships built on mutual respect and hard work. Mistakes were no longer punishable sins, but lessons that helped them grow. Each sunrise brought new challenges, and with them, new opportunities to learn and understand. Approaching the end of the season, they organized a small harvest party, a celebration for the fruits of their labor, laughter spilling out into the open air as they gathered friends and families to share in their success. Tables were laden with crops they had planted, dishes brimming with food they had grown together. In the midst of the festivities, Farmer Thompson raised a glass, his gravelly voice ringing out above the chatter. To hard work, to growth, and to facing fears together. You've all proven yourselves to be more than just kids chasing a thrill. As laughter erupted around them, Jake caught Tommy's eye, and for a moment the realities of that fateful night echoed in their hearts. They had come full circle, not just evolving as individuals but transforming as a group. They had stepped into a realm where real courage thrived, not from tearing others down but from lifting themselves, learning, connecting, and growing. The Night Runners had redefined themselves that summer. They were no longer about fear, but about the empowerment of community and purpose. As they celebrated together, under the glow of the moonlight that had once filled them with dread, they finally understood the true essence of connection. And as the stars twinkled above Farmer Thompson's land, illuminating the joy bustling below, the shadows of that night faded away, replaced by the promise of new beginnings and the strength of friendships forged in the heart of shared hope. The night fell heavy over the rolling fields, stars flickering in the ink-black sky like distant candles. Out in the heart of the countryside, Farmer Dale was finishing up a late evening chore, the rhythmic sound of his shovel striking the ground breaking the stillness. Just a few yards away, 4 pairs of eyes were watching him intently, anticipation bubbling like a pot about to boil. The group, known locally as the Hilltop Gang, had built a reputation on their mischievous antics. They weren't just pranksters, they were thrill-seekers, riding on a wave of bravado that often teetered into foolishness. And tonight, they had set their sights on what they thought was the ultimate target, Farmer Dale. "Look at him, just a lonely old guy," whispered Liam, the bravest of the gang, excitement threading his voice. "This is going to be epic." The others chuckled, images of the farmer's startled face dancing in their minds. The thrill of the unknown sent shivers of adrenaline through them. Whispered Mia, her bravado wavering. "What if he gets mad?" But that small voice of reason was quickly swept away by the louder whispers of adrenaline and confidence. "Don't be such a wimp. He's just a farmer. We'll toss some fireworks, maybe even a fake snake, and boom, he'll be running scared." The plan sparked a fire in their imaginations, churning up visions of laughter and tales they could boast about for weeks. With a final shared glance, the gang darted sneakily toward the old farmhouse, shadows slipping silently through the underbrush as they approached the worn wooden porch. The moonlight illuminated their path, but their hearts raced with the thrill of impending mischief. "On the count of 3, Liam said, adrenaline pumping. 1. Just then, the air shifted, and a creaking sound startled them as the old barn door swung open. There stood Farmer Dale, tall and broad-shouldered, his face half hidden by the brim of his worn hat. His gaze locked onto the gang with a calm intensity that sent a shockwave through each of them. He called out, a hint of amusement in his voice. The bravado the gang had built up deflated in an instant. Caught off guard, they hesitated, glancing at each other in confusion. Liam stammered, his confidence evaporating like morning mist, but Farmer Dale didn't buy it. He stepped further out onto the porch, arms crossed, his presence commanding. "You can't scare me, you know," he said with a wry smile. The gang stood frozen, their schemes suddenly feeling small and pointless. The farmer was unfazed, his demeanor almost mocking. Dale asked, amusement creeping into his tone. In that moment, Jake, the newest member of the gang and the least experienced in the shenanigans, felt a twist in his stomach. "It was just supposed to be a joke," he squeaked, voicing the doubt that hung heavy in the air. Dale mused, chuckling softly. "I see, but do you know what fear does to people? It makes them feel small and powerless." The weight of his words hovered over the gang, enveloping them in a sudden realization. This wasn't just about pranks. It was about understanding the deeper currents of life. Life on the farm wasn't easy. It was a series of challenges, battling unpredictability, weather, and the elements. The gang looked at each other, their earlier bravado now dissipating, swallowed by a new wave of uncertainty. Dale continued, "Instead of spreading fear and chaos, why not use that energy for something good? Work with me for a week." Mia blurted out, shocked. "Yes," Dale said firmly, but his expression softened. "Nothing teaches you about life quite like working it." For the first time, they felt the gravity of what the farmer was proposing. It was unprecedented territory, a chance to step beyond who they thought they were. A few weeks of hard work, fresh air, and perhaps even wisdom gained wasn't that worth considering. Nervously, Liam stepped forward. "All right, we'll give it a shot," he said, though uncertainty colored his tone. Dale laughed, the deep sound ringing through the night. I can't promise it'll be glamorous, but you'll be surprised how much fun hard work can be. And so, under the watchful eyes of the moon and stars, the Hilltop Gang took their first tentative steps onto Farmer Dale's land, where the air was rich with the sense of earth and growth. What started as a series of mischief-making plans had transformed into an unexpected opportunity for growth. Days turned into a week, each sunrise marking a fresh beginning. The initial excitement of being out of their comfort zone introduced a wave of physically demanding work. They spent the first few days clearing out weeds, learning to sow seeds, and understanding the rhythms of the farm. The sun beat down on them, but with each passing moment, they began to forge a connection with the land and each other. They laughed together as they struggled to haul hay bales and looked incredulously at the dirt smeared across their faces. Jake joked, wiping sweat from his brow. They all burst into laughter. But as days wore on, they found themselves working more than just the physical labor. They learned about patience, respect for nature, and the importance of being part of something bigger than themselves. Farm life taught them resilience, as nature had its own ideas about growth. Some plants thrived while others withered away, and they soon learned to let go of their expectations. One afternoon, while digging through a patch of stubborn weeds, Mia paused to look up at Dale, who was expertly tending to the vegetable beds. She asked, genuinely curious. "I learned by doing," Dale replied simply, glancing up. "Mistakes were my best teachers. Every fall made me stronger." As the days continued, the gang transformed. No longer the troublemakers who thought it clever to spread fear for a laugh, they were now part of a community, learning the values of hard work and cooperation. The bonds between them deepened as they sweat and toiled together, each moment bringing them closer to one another. One late afternoon, they gathered by the old barn, exhausted after an especially grueling day. The sun dipped low, bathing the fields in warm colors as they took a moment to rest, leaning against the rough wooden boards. They began to share stories of their past, their dreams, and the fears that had once driven them to act out. "I thought being a prankster made me cool," Liam admitted, staring out into the field stretching before them. Mia nodded. "I think I was just trying to fit in. At first, I didn't care who I hurt." They took turns opening up, sharing their vulnerabilities like a storm cloud releasing its pent-up rain. Each confession deepened their understanding of one another, sowing seeds of compassion where once judgment had resided. "I was scared of what people thought of me," Jake added, his voice quieter. "And we thought scaring the farmer would make us feel brave," Liam continued. As they reflected, Farmer Dale approached, a knowing smile on his face. "You see, this is what I meant about facing fears." As night fell, enveloping them in a blanket of stars, something shifted yet again within the gang. They had taken the leap from being pranksters to becoming stewards of the land and each other's hearts, grounded in the lessons instilled by Farmer Dale. Word of their transformation spread through the town, and soon, friends began to come to visit the farm, wanting to see what had become of the notorious Hilltop Gang. They were no longer seen as troublemakers. They had become a source of inspiration, spreading compassion and camaraderie wherever they went. One evening, as they all gathered to celebrate the harvest they had nurtured, Farmer Dale raised a glass. Cheers erupted from the group, the warmth of community wrapping around them like a hug. In that moment, they realized they were no longer just a gang. They were something stronger, something more unified. As the sun began to set on Farmer Dale's land, they sat together laughing and sharing stories, savoring the joy of life woven through the fruits of their labor. The shadows of their past dissipated under the soft glow of the evening light, replaced by the promises of tomorrow. And for the Hilltop Gang, the night that had begun with fear and mischief had turned into an adventure of growth, where they discovered not only the strength of the land but the strength within themselves. It was a transformation they had never expected, a journey that ultimately led them home. Under a canopy of shimmering stars, shadows danced across the quiet fields of Green Valley. A warm breeze rustled through the corn stalks, but all was not well in this peaceful setting. Up on the hill, 4 figures huddled together, plotting their next move in the dead of night. The notorious gang known as the Night Owls had chosen their target, Farmer Thompson. "Tonight's the night," whispered Jake, his eyes glinting with mischief. He was the ringleader, always one step ahead with his grand ideas. Across from him, Mia chewed her lip, flicking nervous glances toward the dark farmhouse. She said hesitantly, "He could get really mad. I mean, he's a farmer." Liam chimed in, his bravado injecting the group with a blast of enthusiasm. "What's the worst that could happen? Fun for us, maybe. But I don't want to mess with him," she replied, though her resolve weakened against the excitement swirling around them. "Listen, we'll just toss some firecrackers and maybe a rubber snake. He'll jump, and we'll split before he even knows what's happening," Jake added, the thrill of their plans drowning out the last traces of doubt. With their plan firmed up, they sneaked through the tall grass, hearts racing as they approached the old wooden farmhouse. The moon illuminated their path, casting eerie shadows that spiked their adrenaline. "On three," Jake instructed, their breaths hitching in anticipation. "One." Before he could say three, a crack of thunder echoed across the sky, illuminating the scene in fleeting flashes of light. A storm was brewing, but the gang's resolve stood unwavering. They had come too far to turn back now. With a burst of energy, Jake launched the firecracker into the air. It exploded like a mini meteor, light spilling everywhere. For a moment they stood there, frozen in their own excitement. But then they laughed nervously as the sound echoed throughout the fields, bouncing off the barn and carrying into the night. Suddenly, a loud creak of the porch door shattered their thrill. Farmer Thompson, a ring of age around his eyes but strength in his posture, stepped into the doorway. He muttered, squinting through the dim light. Adrenaline surged through the gang as they panicked. "Go," Mia yelled, urging them to run back into the darkness. They sprinted around the side of the barn, hearts pounding, ready to escape, thinking they had gotten away with their prank. But what happened next was far from the escape they imagined. "Come on out, kids." Farmer Thompson's voice boomed across the field, but there was no anger, only the calmness of someone who had seen far worse than a gang of kids trying to scare him. Confusion seeped into the gang. Jake asked, peering around the edge of the barn. He could see the farmer standing on the porch, arms crossed, a bemused look playing on his face. Liam asked, uncertainty etched on his features, but Jake felt an odd compulsion to confront the farmer. Maybe this was their moment to show that they weren't afraid. "Fine, let's go back," Jake said, his voice tinged with defiance. They walked slowly up to the porch, each step heavy with trepidation. "Nice fireworks," Thompson said, leaning back, a hint of laughter in his eyes. "Do you kids think you can scare me?" Jake responded, trying to regain some semblance of bravado, but the humor he intended fell flat against the farmer's calm demeanor. Thompson asked, his tone shifting slightly, tugging at the edges of seriousness. It was just Mia started. Just a prank," Thompson interrupted. "You kids need to understand that fear doesn't play." In that moment, his words struck deeper than the gang expected. They shrank back, shuffling on the porch, suddenly feeling less like mischievous adventurers and more like guilty children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. "You see, I work hard every day to keep this farm running. I've faced storms that would terrify most people. What you're doing is trivializing that fear for a laugh," he said, standing firm. A silence fell over them, thick with contemplation. Farmer Thompson was speaking truth that cut through their bravado, leaving them feeling vulnerable and exposed. They had come to intimidate, but now they faced a man who seemed unaffected by their childish antics, a man who had seen life beyond their wildest fears. Liam asked finally, voice shaking with uncertainty. "I'm not afraid of you kids," Thompson replied, softening ever so slightly. "But you know what? If you want to understand fear, why don't you join me on the farm for a week?" "Work," Mia echoed incredulously. It was hardly the response they anticipated. "Why not? Scaring people is a waste of energy. You could use that effort to learn something." His gaze pierced through their uncertainty. There was a peculiar silence again as the gang exchanged glances. Could it be that this experience would be worthwhile? Would it give them something more than just a story to tell? "Fine," Jake said, his voice steady now. "We'll do it." Mia chimed in, half joking but her heart racing. "That's right," Thompson said with a nod. For the next week, the gang dug into farm life far beyond what they had anticipated. Each sunrise served as a new beginning, far removed from the mischievous antics they were used to. They learned how to work the fields, feeling the dirt beneath their fingernails, something they had never experienced before. At first, it was grueling. They woke early, cursing their own decisions as they trudged out to face the tasks ahead. But as they pulled weeds, planted seeds, and fed the animals, an unexpected transformation began to take place. The hard work that initially felt unbearable slowly morphed into something tangible, a sense of purpose. Thompson joked one morning as they worked together in the fields, a smirk playing on his lips. "Yeah, well, it was a stupid idea," Jake admitted, wiping the sweat from his brow. "The best lessons are often the hardest learned," Thompson said, that glimmer of wisdom in his eyes. As the days passed, the bonds within the gang deepened. Laughter echoed through the fields as they shared stories, and even as they teased each other, it was all in good humor, a comfortable camaraderie forming. They learned to respect the land, and that respect filtered into their interactions with one another. They saw each other in a new light as partners facing a common challenge. On day 5, Mia tripped while hauling a bucket of grain, spilling it everywhere. Instead of mocking her, Jake rushed to help. "Don't worry. I've done worse," he grinned, joining in her laughter as they both knelt in the grain-swirled dust. By the 7th day, something had changed in the gang entirely. They had grown to appreciate the rhythms of nature, the cohesive harmony of work and rest. The emotional payoff came as they gathered for a meal at the end of their week together. Sitting around a rustic table laden with fresh vegetables from the farm, the gang shared stories of their once misguided ideas, their foolish attempts to scare the farmer. "I still can't believe we thought that would work," Liam chuckled, the warmth of the meal creating a sense of belonging. "No, we were just kids," Mia replied, smiling. "You kids showed courage this week," Thompson announced, looking around the table. As the sun set outside, draping the table in warm hues, a new understanding washed over them. There was more to life than seeking cheap thrills at the expense of others, a richness to be found in labor, laughter, and the bonds they forged. They had come to his farm hoping for an easy scare, but what they received was far more significant, a lesson on courage, kindness, and how to face the world authentically. In that moment, the night owls transformed into something greater. They were no longer just a gang. They were a team, drawn closer together by mutual respect and growth. They had traded in their masks of bravado for something far more genuine. As they finished their meal and the evening shadows stretched long across the porch, Farmer Thompson raised his glass in a toast. To unexpected lessons, to hard work, and to new beginnings. That night, as the stars glittered overhead, the night owls realized they'd become more than just a group seeking thrills. They had discovered the strength of community, the joy of teamwork, and the value of facing their fears together. And that transformed their lives in ways they had never imagined. Under the cover of darkness, the air felt electric, thick with excitement and mischief as the gang assembled behind the dilapidated barn on Farmer Don's property. They were known as the Shadow Crew, 4 friends with a penchant for pranks, always seeking the next thrill to ignite their imaginations. Tonight, they had set their sights on an old legend, scaring the ever-stoic Farmer Don, the man who had spent decades tilling the same fields. Whispered Emily, a flicker of doubt crossing her face as she glanced toward the dimly lit farmhouse. Jake scoffed, his bravado shining through. "It's just a harmless prank. We'll scare him silly." The gang erupted with laughter, the kind that seemed to reverberate in the still night air. "Remember that time we scared Mr. Liam?" chimed in, a wicked grin spreading across his face. He nearly fainted. Emily rolled her eyes but couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. Making Farmer Don jump was supposed to be a hilarious caper. Little did they know how underestimated the farmer was. As the clock struck midnight, the gang slinked closer to the farmhouse. The old wooden porch creaked under their weight, each sound seeming to echo through the silence. They gathered in a tight circle, plotting their moves. Jake would throw a firecracker while Liam would knock on the door. The plan was simple. It was time to unleash the chaos. Jake urged, his heart racing with adrenaline. 1, 2. He lit the firecracker, tossing it onto the porch. The loud bang shattered the peaceful night, replaced instantly by a cacophony of screeches and shouts as they burst into action. Screamed Liam, knocking on the door just as they scattered into the shadows of the nearby cornfield. The plan felt flawless, and for a fleeting moment, danger was intoxicating. But then came a sound that stopped them cold, the heavy thud of the farmhouse door swinging open. The silhouette of Farmer Don stood framed in the doorway, his expression unreadable against the backdrop of the warm glow from inside. With a mere swiftness, he descended the steps, moving toward the direction of the noise like a man who knew exactly what was happening. "Nice effort, kids," he called out, his voice steady, almost amused. The gang froze, realizing their carefully constructed plan was crumbling before their eyes. They had expected anger, fear, maybe even panic, but not this calm, amused demeanor that seemed to easily deflate their bravado. Farmer Don said, stepping off the porch and toward the fading echoes of their laughter, "You think it's clever to induce fear." A hush enveloped them as they shared looks of uncertainty. The thrill they felt seconds ago was replaced with a sobering reality. "But it was just supposed to be a joke," Emily stammered, suddenly feeling embarrassed. The farmer raised an eyebrow. People throw around the word joke without considering the consequences. Liam swallowed hard, realizing that this wasn't just some old man scolding them. It was a lesson unfolding before their eyes. "We didn't mean any harm," he whispered, suddenly feeling small and foolish. Farmer Don stepped closer, the faint scent of earth and sweat lingering around him. "Listen, kids," he said, his tone firm yet softening as he examined them. "I'd like you to understand something." Suddenly their minds were painted with images they hadn't considered. Farmer Don was not just a simple farmer. He was a man who had weathered hardships, someone who understood loss and sacrifice far beyond a punchline. He continued, challenging them. The gang felt a whirlwind of emotions swirl inside them. Confusion, embarrassment, and the nagging sense of curiosity all mixed into one. Was it really worth it to frighten him when they could instead confront their own insecurities by stepping into something greater than themselves? "Fine," Jake blurted out, surprising even himself. Emily and Liam exchanged bewildered glances, but a collective sense of camaraderie rose around them. "Yeah, let's see what it's like to work the land," she added, her voice firming up. Farmer Don's expression shifted, a mix of surprise and approval spreading across his face. They spent the next few days in a blur of activity. Each sunrise greeted them with new challenges. They pulled weeds, tilled earth, and sowed seeds. It was backbreaking work, and at first they struggled, grumbling over sore muscles and dirt-stained clothes. Yet, as their efforts bore fruit, tiny green shoots poking through the soil, the thrill of creation started to take root within them. One afternoon, as they labored under the sun, Mia caught a glimpse of Don watching them from a distance, leaning against a fence. "You know, you might be onto something with this farming thing," she said, wiping her brow. Don chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Life is about nurturing, and you're learning the essence of it." Day turned to night, and they enjoyed the fruits of their labor when they gathered together around the fire pit to share stories and laughter. Their camaraderie deepened with each passing moment. Liam said, laughter erupting around the circle as the memory of chaos filled the air. Jake retorted, unable to restrain his laughter. But as the night grew darker, something shifted in their dynamic. Farmer Don's lighthearted approach gradually transformed into deeper conversations about hardship, loss, and the importance of resilience. He shared stories of crop failures, of storms that had threatened his livelihood, of moments that nearly broke him. Each story served as a lesson, helping them put their own lives and actions into perspective. Weeks flew by, and just as the crops and friendships blossomed, something else emerged: an unexpected storm. Dark clouds gathered overhead, rolling in like a heavy blanket, casting shadows across the landscape. As the wind began to pick up, the gang hustled to secure the loose equipment around the farm. Emily asked anxiously, glancing at the darkening sky. "We'll ride it out," Don replied, eyeing the clouds. As the first drops began to fall, a tension settled in the air, heavier than before. What had once been laughter filled with mischief turned to worry. The wind howled like a wild animal, and within moments the gentle rainfall transformed into a torrential downpour. It was chaotic, the kind of storm that could wreak havoc in an instant. The thunder rumbled, low and threatening, while lightning danced across the sky. Don shouted over the din, ushering the gang toward the farmhouse as panic began to set in. They scrambled through the door, heartbeats quickening as the noise of the storm surrounded them. But as they settled inside, flickering shadows from the lightning cast ghostly shapes on the walls. Outside, the world was consumed by chaos, rattling against the windows, a powerful force of nature that felt both fearsome and thrilling. "I've seen storms like this before," Don said, his voice steady, despite the chaos outside. "But they always pass." Just as the words left his lips, a particularly loud crack of thunder shook the house, and the lights flickered ominously. Instinctively, the gang huddled closer together, seeking comfort in one another amidst the storm. They could feel the weight of fear creeping in, reminding them of their earlier efforts to evoke it in someone else. Yet in this moment, they realized their initial plan to scare Farmer Don had brought them here, to understand fear, to learn about camaraderie and resolve. They had discovered that true strength didn't come from fright, but from facing challenges together. As the storm raged, Emily grabbed Liam's arm, her voice trembling. "It will," Jake replied, though panic simmered beneath his calm facade. "Don's right." And just when they thought the worst was over, the lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness. They heard the howling wind, punctuated by furious claps of thunder, and suddenly the walls felt as if they were closing in around them. "Stay calm," Farmer Don shouted, trying to reassure them. "Let's stick together." For the first time, they saw Farmer Don not just as the older, stoic figure ruling his land, but as a lighthouse guiding them through a tempest. And they understood that challenges, like storms, served as a testament to their strength, something they had never fully appreciated before. "Let's keep talking," he suggested. "Focus on something positive." But before they could even begin, a loud crash thundered outside, reverberating through the house. The windows rattled as they gasped, the fear rising within them like the storm outside. Don commanded, but the chaos swept in, drowning out his voice. They clung to one another as the storm tore through the farm, fury breaking against their haven. Just then, a loud bang echoed from outside like a gunshot. Despite the fear clawing at their insides, Jake stepped forward. He declared, inching toward the door, knowing full well he had to face the storm inside and out. "No!" Emily shouted, but the winds howled against the door, and Jake felt something deep inside him break. This was bigger than just a prank. It was about confronting fear and embracing courage. He pushed the door open, rain pouring in like a violent cascade, and stepped into the chaos outside. As he stood there, the wind whipping his hair, he was struck by the raw power of nature. In that moment, he felt alive, every nerve singing with possibility. The storm was far from over, but something in him had shifted. The thrill of fear had transformed into a call to action. He shouted back to his friends, who hesitated in the doorway, uncertainty painted across their faces. "This is our moment." With each step he took, the rest of the gang felt the pull of his bravery. This was their chance to prove their worth not only to themselves, but to Farmer Don, who had believed in them when they had almost given up on themselves. And as they stepped out into the rain, focused on the strength of each other's resolve, they knew one thing for certain. This was not just a storm. They were ready to face whatever came next as a team. With fear and courage swirling together, reality and possibility collided like thunder and lightning on that fateful night, marking the beginning of an adventure they never expected, spinning toward an uncertain fate. The winds howled around them, but in the eye of the storm, they found hope and irreversible change just beyond the horizon.